I can take it easy. People can sit right there too, because I'm over top of myself. I'm just pulling back.
Okay, so are we getting on that?
Yeah, I think we're about ready. It's about the planning meeting. Carrie Ann had the suggestion that we start with a question to kind of get people thinking. And so the one that we kind of came up with was thinking a little bit about reciprocity and maybe thinking about both introducing yourself and then thinking about your relationship to the forest and maybe something from the forest that you use and something that you give back. And so I can start. My name is Matilda Hernandez Mieres. I'm part of the Forest Reciprocity Group. One of the things that I love to harvest are bay nuts. And one of the things I like to do when I'm harvesting is to take some of the dead wood off the trees and kind of put them, not near the base, but around the edge of the drip line to kind of create more mycelial areas.
So I'm assuming these were your roasted bay nuts at the counter?
No, I'm guessing those are pips. But
Thank you. Great.
I brought some to try too.
Yeah, my name is Tom Shaver. I live at Emerald Earth Sanctuary in Boonville. Been there about 17 years. We're an intentional community on 189 acres. I've been doing a lot of mushroom foraging over the years. Even going down into town and selling them at a sort of renegade farmer's market. Also providing to the community. I also have a Lucas sawmill. Been milling up lumber from trees that have come down. So yeah, do a lot in the forest. We just did a broadcast burn yesterday.
I'm Jackie, and I live in Branscombe. What I use from the forest is the calm and the peace and the soul healing. What I'd like to give back are things from my my skill set, which is writing and researching. So that's why I'm here. So now maybe I can.
Hi, my name is Joseph Treehugger. I love the forest. I try my best to always breathe deep and walk slow and be aware and give back my voice to the humans who are mistreating the forest and try to plant trees with my children and take them on mushroom picking and teaching them how to, thank the mushroom and tap the spores out and just be, try to be in the balance as much as possible.
I'm Mary Power. I'm an ecologist at Berkeley, but I became an ecologist just through luck and because I love being alone in the forest like Jackie and Joseph. And I guess trying to think what I give back is I work within the UC Natural Reserve System, and the purpose of the Natural Reserve System is to study nature deeply, but not leave a footprint on that nature that lasts more than a few years after experiments. So we do watering or other kinds of experiments, but nothing heavy-handed compared, and then that's in contrast to UC's forestry and ag experimental stations where they can be heavier-handed. So I think that network is the most, those of us who work with it, is the most important thing at Berkeley. It's the most important legacy Berkeley leaves to the future, or UC in general, in my opinion. And it protects lands and gives us a window into how they operate when they're minimally disturbed.
I'm Govinda. I got introduced to CFIP work in '93, last century. And I've always been totally infatuated with earth lodges after riding my bicycle across the country in 105 degrees and stepping into an earth lodge, and I could feel my consciousness coming back into my body, and I was like, whoa, a living being. Structure was like, whoa, that's pretty neat. And so, in living in the forest, we're out here a lot like everybody else, fuel load reduction, and live in a little tiny little yurt kind of earth lodge now and building a 60-foot diameter. So thin enough forest and reciprocity.
Hi everyone, I'm Peter. My relationship with the forest is that of the chainsaw and the drip torch and working to thin it out and bring back fire back in the story, back into the re-story. So, yeah, I give back through dead wood.
Hi, I'm Nick, and I'm an aspiring natural builder and woodworker. So there's obviously taking the resources from the forest itself and including the forest floor, but what I'd like to give back is understanding and exploring more of some of our forgotten history of slower working, more hands-on, human-powered implements of interacting with that nature. So it's a long, slow journey, but just happy to be on it.
I'm Phil. I caretake some forest in Branscombe. What the forest provides me with is like everything, but like water, I think would be the top thing for me. Clean water to swim in and drink. And what I give back, I think the biggest thing is attention. Just like being out there and observing and listening all the time.
My name is Martin. I grew up in the Forest Service in the woods of Oregon. But of course, you learn more about ecology and environment as you get older. I don't always agree with the practices that my father had implemented as a district ranger for the Mountain National Forest for many decades. But you grow, and now we've started a new family dream. We have a 10-acre property just on the other side of the tree land here, off Mulligan Road, off Branscombe. And we're learning how to steward that. You know, how can we balance our interest in organic, sustainable food, as well as how can we be great stewards of our forest. We have about 6 acres, which is all forested and meadows, and we're part of Pat Higgins' River Recovery Project for fish habitat. And just out of the blessing of falling into that when we came here, it's really an opportunity that we see. How can we utilize this forest, return it to its proper balance in nature, in forest health, fire mitigation, of course, and what can we do then with any of these materials that we can glean? So we're just eager to learn.
I'm Karen Youngblood. I work for Usal River Forest Company. I spend a lot of time in the forest, and I think my favorite kind of exchange with the forest is thinning wood and then burning it and making biochar and putting the biochar back in.
My name is Jessica Romer, and I've been living at Tan Oak Park for the last 30 years. And my connection with the forest is I was diagnosed with AIDS in 1987, and working with the medicines in the forest and living the life out here away from stress, I've managed to stay alive. And so giving back is really thankful for everything I've received from the forest. Personally, individually, thank you for giving me. And I'm basically a place setter right now, or a holder, and we're giving Tan Oak Park back to the community to be used as an education center, gathering center. It's kind of like we've held it for 30 years now as a retreat center. Now it's time to pass it on and feel secure that it's not just going to a group that's just going to abuse it, use it, and destroy it. And so thank you all for being here.
I'm Jenny, and I think I've always gotten solace from the forest since I was a little kid, just to go there when I needed to contemplate something or just be away from people. And I gather herbs from the forest floor, horsetail and solemn seal to make tinctures. And, I have a lot of, what I give back is, well, our work indirectly educating about forest reciprocity, and just a lot of gratitude. I've never ceased to amaze me how the forest helps us in so many ways. Even after it's burned, the charcoal is still good for drawing infection out of a wound or healing stomach upset. So a lot of gratitude back to the forest.
I'm Chuck Payne. I've been with Cloud Forest since its founding. I'm a geologist and work doing the restoration of environmental contaminated sites. So for me, I've been studying the Earth, the planet Earth, and biological life on the planet since its inception billions of years ago. So I'm here as a holistic kind of study of all things Earth, and the forest is one of my favorite places to actually reconnect with all living creatures. So I want to get back to it.
My name is Kimber Holmes. I've been a resident of Layton Hill since '96. Consider myself a land steward. Had lived off the grid for 25 years. Now I'm in town on my commercial property, trying to steward it in a sustainable, homesteady way. But I also bring to the table a background in cooperative business management, as well as a decade in renewable fuels, working with locally produced biodiesel, but also looking at locally produced fuels through pyrolysis. And yeah, so happy to contribute to the conversation.
Casey O'Neill, I'm a farmer. The forest gives us acorns for pigs, lots of biomass for hugelculture, and we try to get back by managing the oak woodlands to keep the pine fir, the conifer species down so the oaks can thrive, and pull out disease and dying timber for use and for firewood and stuff.
Hi, my name is Carriana Reynolds, and I echo and share a lot of what people said about just giving back to the forest by recognizing the consciousness in the beings in the forest as the same consciousness that's in me, and just the miracle of that circle of life. And I work for Trees Foundation, and that is a way of giving back and working to support healthy land stewardship and promote it as a way of life, as a way of giving back. So to provide resources to empower people to do that, and to empower groups to do that. And I also am working on a natural burial project with my husband and others. And so that's a way of literally giving ourselves, our bodies back to feed the forest and go back naturally into the natural system of the forest.
My name is Bodie Harnish. I'm a frog, and I grew up in the forest, and so it's provided a lot to me over the years. Firewood, foods. Recently also really excited about making confections out of bay nuts. But to give back, over the last 5 years, I've really been realizing the need to really engage in stewardship, and so just whenever I'm walking through the woods, looking and seeing things, need a little adjustment here and there, and appreciating also all of the non-human actors that add their little bit to the grand picture of the forests.
Hi, I'm Monkey. My background, I grew up in the woods of SoCal in Los Padres, San Angeles Crest Forest all my life, been connected to it. My parents always wonder where me and my sisters went wrong, and we're like, you didn't go wrong, you taught us this. We just stayed living in it. My background is basically wildlife and rehab work and reintroduction to the animals out there, and education with kids in that, and kind of reconnecting. I left SoCal back in 2000 and moved up this way, and worked a lot with Joseph down here on many projects. The Eagle Project, just recently we won a battle in Potter Valley. And I'm just kind of getting back in, faded out of it, and now see the need to get back in, and especially working with the young ones and getting them involved. And it doesn't matter what we get them involved in, just that we get them out here, because there's so much going on of what we got to do to help our earth and steward it. There's many areas kids can steer to, and it's up to us to guide them there.
Clark and Anna, y'all want to introduce
I'm Clark Stevenson. I work for the Watershed Research and Training Center and the point of contact for the funding that is making this, helping support FROG with this process. And yeah, I'm from outskirts of Sacramento, currently live in Arcata. I've always been around the forest and have been working in the forest for a long time. The job that I was coming from before this was with the Air District Attorney to work on bioenergy developments. So there's a unique perspective there involving biomass utilization and just the scale that California has seen to really address it. But I'm really excited about this because this is, on the ground understanding of what the local needs and community needs are, being a student of the natural resource. I felt it.
Yeah, the question we were asking people is, outside of introducing yourself, is thinking about your relationship of the forest and maybe something that you take from the forest and something to give back.
I take from the forest inspiration and just a sense of how everything's so interconnected and interwoven. And giving back, I don't know. So far I've been doing, recently I've been doing a lot of like grant writing and administrative kind of stuff, which is going to eventually help give back to the forest, but it's like a long, drawn-out process. So the forest keeps giving me the inspiration to keep doing that kind of stuff. But my name's Anna Hope Farquhar. I've been involved in environmental justice projects all my adult life, from living in tree sits to planting fruit trees in schools all over California, having a regenerative farm, and now I work as environmental director for the Sherwood Valley Band of Pueblo Indians, and get to do grant writing and work on environmental projects there.
Did we get everybody?
Okay, so I'm Jeff again. I live in Piercy, and I was forced into becoming a semi-lapsed anthropologist, and felt that if I was really going to understand the human community, I may as well look at my own carefully. And I've come to the conclusion that our biggest problem is that we are divorced from the rest of the biosphere. And until we look at every other living being on Earth as a cousin, however distant that may be, we are not going to resolve the divorce that we're suffering.
I'm Eric Lacerda-Hitch. I live in Laytonville. And, well, I guess the inspiration I get from the forest is that it's not just the trees. And, I think if people see it as being a whole different biome, it's gonna go a long way. So, just the concept of giving back to the forest by encouraging that viewpoint, and you know, the forest is not a monoculture crop. It's a whole ecosystem. If we can see that and see the rest of humanity in the world as all being more vital and interesting because of it, and we've come a long way.
Okay, anyone else? Over here?
Oh, hi, I'm
Quick
Peter.
introduction of.
I've been in and out of the community for a while, but I don't know if it was a theme, but it's we need to expand our love and try to find a unity again. So that was my prayer this morning. Here it is. I hope.
Okay, hi everybody, I'm Vincent Brown, and I work with John Canan in making things like this out of the small diameter pools. And what I get out of the forest is everything. And I've spent the last 30 years doing fisheries, stream channel restoration, reforestation, multiple species habitat restoration, forestry work, a lot of training of adult displaced workers, long-term unemployed, in environmental restoration, flood fight, forest fire rehab. And I'm currently working up in Covelo with the Round Furniture Forestry, with the Northern Mendocino Ecosystem Recovery Alliance, and others to do education and job training and forest health, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Glad to be here.
Wow, amazing group. And let me just offer before we get started, because a lot of people did like that breathing exercise. Maybe we can do that again. And I just want to remind you that, you know, it is a long day of talking and a long day of listening. If you find yourself in your head and not listening, but like thinking and talking in your head about what's being said, it's good to try that exercise again. So let's do that right now, and then we'll yield the floor to this wonderful group. So we're going to just take a deep breath in for 4 counts. Now hold, and out for 8. In for 4. Hold. Out for 8.
I guess we really want to use this time to hear from y'all about ways, I guess maybe partially what inspired you to come here, what you think maybe a co-op like this could be a need that maybe that you have, and maybe also in that, since we're looking at this idea of multi-stakeholders and how do we balance all of these interests, it might be nice to get perspective if you're coming from someone that is a landowner that needs, that would be interested in providing materials in exchange for help thinning or maybe for a source of income. If you're someone who's doing forest health work and how that might work for you, or if you're someone who builds with these materials and what would really help meet your needs to, if you need more materials or certain kind of things like that. But as much as possible, we really, want to get input from everybody.
Could you briefly just say what your mission and vision of your co-op is so that we can all be on the same page of what it offers or and how we can utilize it?
I think the mission or the vision of Frog is to really have a culture that's rooted in forest reciprocity. that we're developing long-term relationships with the forests that live around us for the health of the forest and for our communities. And then this co-op is specifically looking at this piece of how do we connect the works and groups that are already doing work? How do we have a larger network of landowners that can pull together, especially in Mendocino County, where a lot of the land is in small land holdings. So a lot of the projects that we've looked at that the Watershed Center has worked with are in areas where most of the land is owned by the federal government. And so it's a different dynamic here. And so we really want to figure out how to connect these pieces so that we can have more energy behind doing this forest health work, and that energy is also being fed back into the communities to have a stronger economy. We know a lot of people in this area are having to find new ways to pay their bills because the economy that had been sustaining things is no longer really there. And so we're really trying to figure out creative solutions for how to work on that, and how can we do that cooperatively.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that this Miro board that's on the table there is actually a workflow issue. And so we're looking at how the needs of the forest in terms of reciprocity. And then what is that workflow, and what are the different organization or participating businesses that can utilize that material either through enhanced processing or final product, and develop that circular economy. And so that the Miro board is one of the things that we were using to kind of navigate through that process of understanding the workflow.
And so we did, it's a little hard in this size of a group, but we do have the board here laminated with pens if anyone wants to look at it and add things directly to the board. We would love that too.
I could tack it to the wall, and then people could walk over to it.
I think it would be super helpful for all of us to be able to take a look at it real quick, because it's a pretty effective rubric. You know, you can snap a picture up, you can snap a picture up, and look at it.
I can explain it, sure.
And while he does that, I'm gonna pass around. We have these, so this is, as someone who tried the bay nuts before, we ran them through a chocolate mill with a little bit of sugar and made it a little bit more like confection, so if people wanna try them.
And if you take a picture of it later, follow it.
Do you roast them first? Or?
Yes, you have to roast them before you eat them. I don't know if anyone's trying to eat a raw bay nut, but it is a way to make yourself sick very quickly.
How long do you have to roast them?
Depends on your taste preference and how fast you're roasting them. The darker they get, the
More caffeine.
not so much the more caffeine, more like the milder they get. Great. Yeah, they're pretty easy.
So, I guess I'll try and explain this to the board a little bit. It's, this was an attempt, before we got the grant, to really model what we'd been working on for a long time, which was what would a business look like to continue to be, to help us sustain our organization and keep doing this work. So there's a lot of different moving parts, but essentially, kind of flowing this way. You know, there's landowners and producers. So there's.
Yeah, it's good. We got some shine problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, sure.
You can just do the flaring.
Okay, well, so, I mean, one of the major issues is getting the materials to the parties that are going to use it. And I think that's one of the real cruxes of our questions that we're going to be answering with this cooperative, hopefully, is the transportation aspect. So there's a lot of costs, labor costs, and fuel costs involved in that. So we're looking at, different models potentially of having places where they could land, but we're also looking at not just poles. So this could incorporate a variety of products from redwood bark for natural insulation to even mushroom logs. Like a potential offshoot of this co-op could be a whole North Coast mushroom growers co-op that could be supplied through some of the forest health
projects, right? So that would be a wonderful thing for our community to be able to grow food from this material.
Just a real quick addition to that, because I was just going to bring that up, is that the logging companies sprayed Garlon and 2,4-D to kill tan oak, for example. And there's a huge block of forest in Mendocino County that I think it's 385,000 acres is owned by one logging company. But they see it as a weed and they're killing it with chemicals. They could make great mushroom logs. So there's a potential in like, you know, working with the forest companies. I just want to throw that in there before I forgot, because they're spraying, I think it's 2 to 5 pounds per person per year or something, or it might even be more than that, of something that's completely carcinogenic and we're all basically getting sick from it. And all the animals are dying from it too, so it's like, we can grow mushrooms that are healthy and take away sickness, or we just let them spray it. So I mean, there's plenty to work on that.
I don't know exactly, but hopefully the mushrooms can help clean up some of that stuff.
That too, yeah.
I'm not sure
That's one of the
specifics.
Sorry to interrupt.
Well, so there's a lot of different, like, kind of directions that this cooperative could go. You know, we're looking hopefully to be hearing from interested parties and use that to kind of drive, you know, the direction that we will eventually go. I mean, one aspect that we really wanted to look into is the mobile processing. So, like, leaving as much of the materials in the forest as possible. And that could be, you know, bark, that could be, you know, there's only so much you can chip, but things like Riffy is doing, like making biochar and then like returning that to the landscape, that's one way. But the mobile processing unit, you know, is going to be trying to fulfill that role and working with other, you know, maybe we would be coming to other forest health projects and like offering training or offering support to make sorting and utilization of these materials kind of easier for everyone.
And then that also, one of the ideas is that the entity could act as a broker, and so because there can be a lot of cost involved if we have to stockpile a lot of logs or other things and then find a way to sell them. And so if you can actually connect directly with the people who are going to use these materials, we can make sure that they're harvested to the lengths and specifications they need, what kind of drying processes have to happen, and being able to not have things sitting in yards so much and actually go directly to the people that are going to use them. A lot of the building projects, I know Eric likes to dry in the woods actually, and so you wouldn't transport it until they're lighter and in a condition to be used, which is a part of why, yeah, this shape will be taking form on what people are interested in pursuing.
That makes a lot of sense to me, the mobile processing concept versus, I mean, it takes away the whole transportation cost and how to transport the logs, like we talked about when you were out there, how they can't be bumped, you know, they have to be separated, you have to keep them in really good condition, and because if you're debarking them there in the woods, you're leaving some of that. I mean, it just seems like the mobile processing is just the way to go. And if each entity that's interested in logs, I would imagine that the amount that they're interested in would not be so huge to require mini trucks, you know, maybe even just one truck, maybe one small truck. I don't know. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many people who, if they had access to a chipper once in a while, could do a whole lot more work, a lot more hugelculture work that could be done, biochar work. And that's, you know, that's an easy like modularization that can then build out, because I think one of the most difficult things with you know, in my limited experience with cooperative projects is throwing a vision out that's too big. And so starting with something that's small and very doable and then building onto that as it goes along is something that's much, much better.
And, you know, and another thing is in terms of utilization is looking at building homes, traditional architecture, and how do we get the planning department and that whole scenario with permits integrated. So the workflow is both in the woods, dealing with the transportation, and then how do we amplify the needs for housing in utilization of this process and the permit mechanisms to make it simpler to do.
Absolutely. So, yeah, the more that starts happening, the more we'll be able to kind of, work to streamline that process.
Have you guys brainstormed all the different types, I'm sure you have, like businesses that can be made, and then tried to find outreach for those particular, I was just thinking, sheds, people always need a little shed built. I don't know, there's a million types of businesses, the mushrooms and this and that, but if you get into like areas of business where people will be like, I'm interested personally, like I want to make some sheds, even though it's not something that I'm super into, but I'm interested in it, or mushrooms, and find people and to get a list here, like what type of business you'd be interested in and supporting a local economy type thing. And then I think the workflow starts coming potentially from that, because then there's like 10 people interested in making sheds. Okay, they're gonna need wood for that. Okay, how many people are gonna be doing fire clearing? Okay, we're gonna funnel wood to there. So most of the people are in Laytonville, so let's get a yard here so we don't have to drive it from the coast. And I don't know. Those are the kind of things that are rattling around in my head. I just thought I'd throw it out there.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, big part of this will be reaching out and interviewing businesses and individuals, but trying to do that also in a way that it's clear to everyone, kind of like, the direction that we're going, and how to. There's many ways to pulling in, I think, like you're saying, and so finding that interest.
I was wondering if you could talk more about the structure of the multi-stakeholder cooperative, because I'm familiar with like an ag cooperative and how that's supposed to function, and a little bit with like a worker cooperative, but like what's the difference like in the structure?
So the structure is very much determined by the founding documents of the co-op. You can set different percentages. So the example I gave during the talk of the company in Canada, the Boiseco, they decided that they wanted equal shares between the mill workers, the loggers, and the local businesses that had invested. And so their board is made up of equal seats of all of those, and then each group elects members to the board. So I think the article I had read was from like a couple years ago, but they had said at least half of the mill workers have had a seat on the board and have rotated through to have that experience. But there are many ways it can be set up. And so it's kind of one of the initial things that we'll, as part of this process, would be deciding how we want resources to be distributed and what that would look like. And so the other thing they set up kind of in those documents is what happens to their profits. And I think in this case, it's a third of the profits get sent to each group. Another section goes to the workers directly as bonuses, and then it's like 50% of the profits go back into research and development, and that's how they were able to expand and have so many subsidiaries.
Have you looked into working or utilizing the industrial sites that are already here and somewhat abandoned, that are old logging and mills, to be the central places where all this can be warehoused, derivatives of products, from building materials to biochar to fuels, have you looked into those folks as stakeholders?
We have looked into that for sure. We didn't, we haven't found anywhere that's like totally ready for it. But yeah, now that there's more momentum and potentially more money behind it, that definitely is.
In 2007, we had actually made a proposal for the Masonite site to actually have a comprehensive location that we worked on. So the idea has been circulated for decades.
Yeah, I worked on it back in 2007.
Okay, nice.
I could add a little bit to that. So there's a number of things that are being funded for this project. One of them is to, through the start of this cooperative development, understand what are economic opportunities here, but also, what are the resources that we need to even start having an informed conversation.
Yeah.
So we've hired Tuckman Geospatial, who are the same people who have done the pod delineations throughout the North Coast Resource Partnership. Really great resources, and they've developed
a model to look at all the abandoned sawmill sites throughout the entire NCRP region, build cost haul shells and feedstock availability within those cost haul shells. So you have a haul distance price, and you also have feedstock availability along 25 to 50 different former sawmill sites. Not only that, but they have the ability to then take sites that maybe aren't included in that and run it through their model that they built and give you back some preliminary assessments. So there's some foundation that is being built here so that we can have maybe, after this initial conversation on, what are the priorities, what type of services, low cost bundling opportunities can we do, high value product creation we can create, where can we go next, and where are the places that we can do that.
Are you running it through, this is going to sound odd, but and people might be into it or not, but have you run it through like an AI kind of process to have it kind of delineate what, using the data of what's available here and the workload and everything to have it kind of map out?
We have a model-based system running, and
Okay.
that's all AI is, just an
Yeah.
integrated algorithm.
Okay.
It's not AI though.
Okay.
There's no active iterative data being put in and then being spit out.
But the same kind of premise.
But we can, if we have a different veg base layer that is maybe updated, in 2025, for example, we move forward to that point, we can probably just put it in and then have the model spit out updated results.
Nice.
Of course, Tuckman will have to still be around by that point.
And so that sort of brings up, how do we utilize the small diameter poles so that we develop.
Which I want to say, Govind, is a conversation that we can't wait to talk about, but we're going to talk about it from 2 to 4 o'clock. We got 2 whole hours to dive into that.
Well, if you're gonna start that at 2, that means we just have 8 minutes left.
Okay.
8
So
minutes
that's-
to 2. So I don't know if you
Even more
wanna-
important to get what we get.
Does this conversation need another 10 minutes, or you wanna wrap it up in 8 minutes?
I mean, yeah,
Nice
I
introduction.
want to just say that like, part of the idea of the global processing unit is that we're processing materials that will go back into the forest and we're designing ways to deliver those materials back into the forest. So for chipping, for the chips, and the chips are going to end up back in a hugel bed that's on contour in the forest, we need an efficient way to deliver that. Maybe it's a hose coming off the chipper, or maybe it's some sort of transfer system. So it's not just a processing unit to get material out of the forest. It's a way to get back to the forest. And also, one of the things we want to integrate into it is maybe mushrooms, putting mushroom spores into the chips that are going back in. Putting a way to inoculate the forest as we do it. So it's a give back as well as a take.
Being late coming in, I don't know how you guys have defined the term forest. Is a forest just woodlands, or is a forest everything that is outside of already developed human structure?
Good question.
We did not define it. Personally, I lean towards the second definition. And maybe even more integrated. I don't think there has to be a clear delineation between where humans live and what's forest. I think that line should be blurred.
I do too, but I wasn't sure whether you were including, the drift from wooded lands to waterways, and the plants that grow in the waterways, and we call them, aquatic forests and so forth, and that continuum from heavily where the floral content on the land is huge to where it's so slate we call it a desert, and the difference between a prairie and a woodlands, and as all those go through, because it seems that we need to look at all of those systems, or all of those, the whole goddamn planet, to really make this as integrated a cooperation as possible.
And so I guess that's one of the things we're imagining with the mobile processing unit is that it would work in conjunction with forest tending work or with forest health grants or other work that's already being done. And so we'd be able to integrate with people who know that forest or know that ecosystem and can guide what's happening. And to get more to Eric's point too, that it would allow for this kind of slower forest health work to be able to do things like hugel beds on contour. And all of these other processes that can have some really long-term benefits to the health of our forest, but it's a slow process.
Yeah, and hopefully the money that comes back from the sale of the logs goes back into the project to enable the forest health aspects of it.
And a lot of focus of this is on these overstocked, damaged lands that are just overgrown, that are just really just out of equilibrium with whatever natural balance. In a forest, I mean, some of these old lands, you can barely call them a forest. The trees are growing, back to back. So it's kind of that imperative to get through and get those poles out of there and not just turn into a biomass facility, because I mean, you're just going to burn it. There's probably enough trees on the planet to burn for 1 year to supply U.S. and then you have no trees left. So biomass may not be the best answer, especially for carbon in the atmosphere. You take the poles and hydrate it to housing for people. So it's not just working with the forest per se, it's to kind of return to a forest. The idea is to try to restore the lands through utilizing the poles themselves and not just turning into chips and not turning into biochar only, but to use the poles themselves and hydrate them, because it's a great building material, incredible building material, and it can provide, we want to work with Habitat for Humanity, we want to work with other groups, we're trying to at least solicit that, so that we can provide homes for people at a reasonable cost. Just labor, a mobile processing unit goes in and grabs the poles and builds a home for somebody.
80 is a great example of you turning the whole country into Carbone. You look at the map between Dominican Republic and Haiti.
There's no trees left.
Really quick, if you thin the forest too, the eagles and the hawks and stuff can fly through under the canopy better.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I was thinking about the turning the round poles into housing and how there's a bit of a phenomena putting a round peg in a square hole where all the building we're used to is all square, like milled logs. And if we don't need to go through that process of milling them, we're gonna have to go through another process of teaching people how to build with round poles.
Yes.
And so that's a whole other training area.
And I think maybe Eric will talk about this more in the next section, but we've been looking at both on ways that you could use round poles to make certain replica, I forget your proper wording for it, but things that could integrate into conventional building systems, as well as with natural building, it lends itself very well to round poles. So using things like redwood bark for insulation or straw bale or cob, and it allows, especially for cob, a mechanism in which you can have these coated structures because they have the round pole timber frame, which is really great in earthquakes. And if you put a shell of natural insulation on it, all of a sudden you have a structure that's not prone to burn. And so we really think that there's a lot of potential to shift this, but it's also, it's a big task.
I know there's potential, but for example, when I was part of RUG in my earlier days, and we did a presentation at the Redwood Valley MAC, like the guiding council of Redwood Valley, and it was like after the recent fires there, and there was someone else who was giving a presentation about like all their efforts for rebuilding, how they were rebuilding, and like kind of pumping out all these stick frame buildings that were, and they were so proud of doing this, but it was just like recreating the same problem, like all the same kinds of houses that burnt, they were pretty much like fast tracking, like getting them put back out again. And so I think, well, I want to like make this effort to like house people who have been displaced or like create more housing. There's a lack of housing, but then like where do we get a chance to pause and think about like what kind of housing and how do we get those really good ideas about natural building and housing that won't burn, get that to be more mainstreamed and be the thing that gets rolled out.
All right, so this has been a great opening discussion. We're going to we want to try to start the next talk in about 10 minutes. So this is how we're going to wrap up this talk. Don't go away. We're going to just give Forest Reciprocity Group, FROG, you know, a chance to say a quick closing remark, and then we're gonna break up into groups of like 4 or 5. Stand up, get in a group, and share about within that group. Listen to one person, 3 other people listening to one person, what their thoughts are right now, and then go around in that group. Just so we're able to share our ideas within the group, and hopefully that bubbles out. And we're also gonna have a sign-up list. Please, if you wanna be on their email list, write your email, and maybe even businesses that you're hoping to get support from, because it sounds like they're working to support your business ideas. Kind of like Trees Foundation supports environmental stewardship ideas, FROG is supporting woodworking business ideas. So,
And I think,
sign up.
I wanna say there's 7 FROG members here, so maybe each one of us can be in one of those groups,
Yeah.
so that we can all take in from folks.
Great.
And we will,
I just wanted to just ground us in the fact that the development of this cooperative, you know, is actually goes beyond just building houses. Like, that is definitely a focus of FROG's, but that the creation of this entity will hopefully foster a wide range of businesses, you know, just to make that clear.
Yeah, and I just will add to that one of the things we want to canvass the community is to find out what business would be appropriate to people. What do people need? That's the iterative process. So we want to find out what you might need, and what you might need, and what you might need. And then that could be a part, maybe that you would be a part of the collective too, and you could then you could give us what you would want, and then we could give back to you what you need. And if we could build that out and try to aggregate everybody, kind of a Venn diagram where there's just an overlap, but we need to kind of understand what everybody else needs to actually kind of solidify and build the business model itself. So that's kind of why we're appealing to the community.
and I guess it would also be good to say here that thanks to the Watershed Center and this grant, we have a real timeline for this. We have until the end of 2024 to submit a final feasible business plan. And if we're able to get to that stage and do all of that, it can probably be attached to implementation money to actually be able to do a pilot program for this. So it's a
staging, we're just staging it. So we have to kind of build an entity that can actually function, a functioning entity. Once we have that, when all these great ideas can come to fruition, we can build them out. And there's some that said there's further down the road, like the poles, converting an industry from poles, from timber to poles. But there's also this whole thing going on in Europe right now where they're doing composite wood, lumber wood, they're building giant beams. They're building high-rises with wood right now. And the danger with that is that the glues are full of formaldehyde. But I just did some research on one of these universities that they're actually amalgamating this, they're gluing it with lignin, one of the materials from wood, they're gluing together, and it's fire resistant. So that's an innovative idea. So it could be a whole new business. We can have a whole commodification of the materials to build eco-friendly beams, and we can feed the lumber industry proper, because you can't mill giant trees anymore. You build giant trees and then mill them.
All right, so if
And
you're
that's
a
kind of
member of, oh, sorry.
A tree farming business too, what you're talking about. The beams, I mean, the high rises.
Well, they just take all the different pieces of the wood, they glue it together, and then they compress it and then mill it.
Right, I've been looking into that quite a bit, it's pretty fascinating.
It's fascinating.
So how
They can
about
replace steel.
if you are a frog, stand up and then go, let's continue, so we all get to have a chat with the frog member. So don't stand up, raise your hand to be a frog, frogger, okay? And yeah, we'll go ahead and break it.